Hi, I'm Dr. Mike, and this is NFGeeks. Well, this video is the third installment of the Ask Dr. Mike series this week, where I'm answering a question by Ann Behrens on the NFGeeks forum on Facebook. And she asked about relationships and NFs, and the first two videos were really sort of a setup talking about the Gottman studies. And this video is actually now going to finally answer the question that she asked. I wasn't going to, and then I took a break, and I thought, no, I should answer it. You know, she did ask it, so it just jogged loose all those other things. So this video is specific to the question, and some of the other stuff will come in from the past videos will come in to sort of accentuate this one. It was the reverse with the other two. You know, those I was trying to present the ideas of the Gottman studies and then throwing type in there. Now I'm going to do the reverse, talk about type and try to throw in some Gottman stuff. So let me read her question once again. Okay, let me get it up. And her question is, how does love between NFs manifest different for each of the types together? I remember you saying INFJ and ENFP were soulmate types, etc. Which do you think go together and why? Okay, so what she is referring to is my tier system. I've talked about this on different videos, I think, on NFGeeks, and certainly I've talked about it on the forum. And that is that I have a tier system of which types should go together, okay, for your type, for any one type. So what I do is, based on your type, I sort of do a hierarchy of which types are good for you to be in a relationship with, from best to worst, okay? And it's tiers, so there's levels, okay? Of this first tier, use your best ones, and then there's the next one, and then the bottom, okay? And it comes from the point of view, all right, that not any two types, I don't think any two types can get together equally, okay? I don't think it's flat. I think that whatever your type is, there are types that are better connected to you than others, okay? It runs on a curve. That's actually how I think, because everything runs on a curve. People should get into that, the normal distribution curve. So I think that the curve kind of puts a bunch of types in the middle for you. That it's not too bad, not too good, not too bad. It's okay. And you have a few that are just stay away, and then you have a few that are really good, and the ones that are really good are probably the ones you should find, right? Now, that doesn't necessarily negate the Gottman study stuff I talked about in the other videos, okay? Because the other videos that I talked about the Gottman stuff was talking about what keeps a marriage together, okay? And if you follow the things that they say of what what Gottman says keep a relationship together, it really doesn't matter what type it is, okay? If you're following those things, the type will stay together. If you're doing the other things, the four things that are bad, criticism, contempt, stonewalling, those things, if you do that, that's gonna, it doesn't matter what your type is. Two NFs doing those things will cause the relationship to tank. So there's nothing in that necessarily says two can't come together, and that's because marriages are really contracts. There's difference between love and marriage. They're not the same thing necessarily. Now, what I want to add into it, and this is where typology comes in. I mentioned this in the other videos, is where you are in your tier system, and which type you're actually with will determine what the nature of the conflict is and how you solve that conflict. And the further down my tier system you are, this is the world according to Mike, but the further you are, meaning that you're with somebody who is less and less compatible with you, the harder it's going to be to do the repairs, do the things you need to do to resolve the conflict, and easier to fall into the bad stuff, okay? But it doesn't mean you can't, okay? It doesn't mean you can't. If you're doing the good things, the marriage will last. If you're doing the bad things, the marriage won't, and it doesn't matter what the two types are. Gottman has shown that, just not even knowing about type, and I agree. So the part I'm adding is type matters and will help in that process. And also I want to point out that my system is a soulmate system. It's a very NF way of thinking. It's not necessarily an SJ version of this might not put the same types together, okay, because they're looking at teamwork and running a household and all that stuff. They're not having the same criteria. Mine is much more a soulmate criteria. Who will really get you, and connect with. That's my criterion. So the way I organize the types and think about it is from that point of view. So let's get into it then. What what do I mean by all this? Well, the question was about NFs, and so what I think is that not every possible NF is a good connection, or that they're all equal. Okay, some NF connections are better than others. So depending on your type, your NF type, and I would say the same thing about the NTs, the SJs, everybody. So I'm just using NFs because the question was about NFs. There is a sort of a hierarchy. Some NF connections are not too good, some are okay, some are better than others. Okay, depending on what they are. So we're going to go worst to best, ideally best. So the worst one, I would say, is when the judging and perceiving worldview is different, because that puts everything into different directions. So for example, for me, out of the NFs, the worst one would be ENFJ, a relationship with the ENFJ. For INFPs, it's INFJ. Now I have to say something about that one. Every time I say that, the INFPs and not all of them, but there's always an INFP or an INFJ who says, "No, I'm married, my best friend." They like rail against it immediately. No ENFPs or ENFJs do that. That's interesting. But they rail against it right away, and they always say, no, it's not true. But I have to say, that has not been my experience. My experience has been ENFJ, ENFP, INFJ has not resulted in a good relationship. If we're talking about marriage, lovers, it has not worked out at all, particularly INFJ. So why is that? Well, I think one of the things is that both types of relationships, ENFP, ENFJ, whatever, they think the relationship is closer and better than it actually is, and that they share and understand the same way more than they actually do. And I think that's because of NF. Okay, so, INFP, INFJs, they share NF and NF values and all that, so they think they're really close together. But nothing in their system processes the same way, and doesn't process in a way that is compatible with each other. Okay, the feelings run in different directions, the intuitive runs in different directions, the strengths are in different directions. There's no compatibility of any of that. Okay, and the way I see it is that people start from the same position. They're NFs, and they start from the same position, but as they go through their process, they land in completely different places. Okay, completely different points of view that are often irreconcilable because of the difference of the functions and judging and all that. They're not seeing the world the same way at all. That's an illusion, and their process is very, very different. It leads to totally different things. Okay, totally different. All right. And that leads to conflict. Okay, mostly the J being annoyed with the perceiver. That's how it starts, and then it just goes round and round and round, because it's always orderliness versus chaos. That's another thing. Orderly, and each one not understanding each other on that issue. Okay, even though they're for whatever reason, but that's because the functions are too dissimilar to each other. Okay, so it starts in the same point, but it goes in all sorts of different ways. So that's not a good one. I think that's the one to be avoided no matter what. Okay. The second one, and for me as an ENFP, would be INFP. Okay. Now that's tough for me, I'll be honest, because I've had very serious relationships, intimate relationships with INFPs, for a long time, very long time. And it's, and I love INFPs, and I always had love for them, but it does sort of unravel. It feels like a plane flying apart, the plane, like the wings come off and then it breaks in half and then the seats fly. It feels like that, something unraveling. That has been my experience of it. Now, I don't think it's actually bad. I think that it requires a lot of maintenance. Okay, ENFP, INFP, and ENFJ, INFJ as well. It requires a lot of fine-tuning and maintenance, more than other relationships within NF. Okay, within the other two, the next two I'm going to get to, don't require the level of maintenance this requires. This requires work. I would say for me, INFP probably requires the most work. ENFJ would obviously require a lot of work, but I don't even think it could work no matter how much work. Whereas INFP can work, but it requires more effort than the other two. And I think the reason for that is that when the two people in the relationship are sort of using their NF abilities and talents at each other, that's where the conflict comes up. Okay, not about the world. I have never been in disagreement with an INFP about what's going on externally. Okay, when the two of us look together, when I'm at a movie with an INFP, something scary to them, it's scary to me. Maybe not the same intensity, but I get why it's scary. Never like confused on those issues, you know. If we think someone's acting immorally, we both do, you know. So it's like two headlights. I often use that metaphor. You know, it's two headlights pointing in the same direction, you know, always going around, you know, seeing things the same way. But you point the lights at each other, and all you get is light in your eyes. You know what I mean? You're blinded. You're not, you know, it's really like that. I think for INFP, ENFP, it's because of the introverted feeling. You know, the other one cannot really understand what the other one's feeling and how they're hurting the other one in whatever it is they're doing. Okay, even though there's extroverted intuition. I think it's particularly hurtful. I think it's particularly hurtful for the INFP because the ENFP's extroverted intuition is very strong and more complex and can say a lot more. What makes it bad for the ENFP is the INFP is so upset they strike back harder. You know, they because they're coming from a much deeper wound. Okay, but I think that's the issue when the two are facing each other. Again, imagine two flashlights, you know, in each other's face. Can't see what's really going on between them, and that just causes it to unravel. You know. Now, I do believe though that understanding MBTI and understanding, you know, INFP and ENFP, and again the same for ENFJ and INFJ, can help in that maintenance. I think that difficulty with the flash that leads to the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse from the other videos. Definitely, but that can be, you know, that can be fixed. So, for example, I think an ENFP and an INFP can stay together if there's a sense of we, and that we is this third thing that is not either person. And so now, once again, the flashlights point at one thing again, and then there'll be agreement. You know, there won't be any disagreement about this because it's very, very similar. So I think if INFP and ENFP can remember that, to take the relationship and make it this third thing, and we need to talk about this thing that is not us, you know, that's we're involved in but not us, I think there'll be less fights. And just a general understanding of personality type, INFP, ENFP, I think that would help. One person is not enough. I can tell you that from my own experience. You'd think, NFGeeks, you know, I'd be able to carry it for two. The MBTI connection, no. The other person has to be into it and understand it and use it too. That's a must. I think that's a must for any relationship now, to be honest. But I do think if you understand, if ENFP, INFP have a great understanding of the types, of each other's type, and use that, take it out, use the relationship as a third thing to talk about, it'll work. But it requires a lot of maintenance, a lot of fine-tuning all the time. I think INFJ, ENFJ is worse because I think they get more mad and bitter at each other. And I think they're firing at each other. You know, that's what I think. You know, the feeling. I think they're you know, they're firing rounds at each other. I think it's a little worse for them. All right, next is your own type. So ENFJ with ENFJ, ENFP with ENFP. You know, that one is a great one because there's total understanding going on in the relationship. Nobody is confused where somebody else is coming from. You know, people always talk about it gets awful in the sense that you see the worst parts of yourself in your partner and you get mad, and that can be true, but that has more to do with you not liking yourself and then taking it out on your partner. You know, that's more of, I don't think that's typological. I think that, you know, the more secure you are, so as an ENFP, the more secure I am with as an ENFP, I could be with another ENFP. You know, and I think that's true with any types. I mean, ISTJ, ESFP, all of us. You know, so I see that issue not about type dynamic, but your own personal stuff. You know, knowing your stuff. But it's a very good relationship. It's a very happy relationship. Everybody knows what the other one's doing. Everybody wants to do the same thing as the other. A lot of empathy involved in it. You know, nobody's confused about when somebody's hurt or why they would be hurt, why they think that's bad. You know, pretty much in agreement a lot of things. You know, I could see myself with an ENFP and being like, you know, it's 11:30. Should we get up? No. Let's get up at 2. You know, it's just, you know, and then we'll eat in bed till 5. And, you know, I could, you know, please, that would be an ENFP weekend dream. You know, to do that. So I can see that. So it's a very comfortable relationship. It's not necessarily the best one in terms of growth, though. Although it's very good. I think it's a happy relationship, but it's comfortable. You know, it's not necessarily a growing. The only way it's growing is if the two of you are growing together because of external things that you've agreed on. But the relationship itself is not necessarily helping you grow, except that you're both on the same path. You know, sort of together. But if you're on different paths, I don't know if it would foster any growth, to be honest. And so that leads to the last one, and that's true for INFP, any of those. The last one is, for me, would be INFJ. ENFP, INFJ, and therefore would be INFP, ENFJ. That's a very balanced relationship, and that's why I think those are actually the best, because they're balanced in good ways, where they're balanced in people say they're not balanced. I don't think that's true. I think they're balanced in the sense that things are going in the opposite direction, but they're also balanced in that the strengths are similar, and I think that helps. So I view these so I'll talk about ENFP, INFJ. I see that as a very balanced flow of energy in terms of a circuit. Okay, it's a good circuit going on. You got an extroverted feeling, going into introverted feeling that is coming out into extroverted intuition that's going into introverted intuition. There's a flow of energy that goes around with ENFP, INFJ, and ENFJ, INFP too. There's a flow of the emotional energy coming around, and that isn't necessarily happening in the others. And each can help the other and help the other grow by giving something the other doesn't have or that the other needs. One of the things I can give INFJ, and that I always give INFJ, is some validation to their inner world that nobody can understand and see, or whatever, their mystical, weird inner place that they go to. And here's the thing I say about it. It's not so much I know what's going on with them 100%, but I know that they're experiencing something. It's not all crap. There's something going on with them, and I know it, and then that's real. And I find that INFJs appreciate that about me, that I know, friends or otherwise, that I can do that. So I think that's what happens. I think that a balance is created. The perceivers allow the judges to loosen up a little bit. The judges help the perceivers with the judging, and getting together in that way. And I think that's the best balance. I always said that, and I might write this someday just to write it. I always said that an ENFP INFJ relationship, especially even if it would be better if it was like husband and wife, would be the best detectives ever. Okay, the best detective stories would be an ENFP and an INFJ. Because the ENFP would be about the motives, and that, because of the grandmother, and that's why they want to be in the will, and the INFJ would just be like, look under that blanket, why? There's something under there, and there's the gun. It'd be great detective stories, NF detectives, that'd be great. If I was with an INFJ, I would start my own NF detective thing, That'd be great relationship counseling. NF detectives, we find evidence of relationship problems, But it's a great balanced relationship. And you know what? And I want to talk about it specifically because that's the one I know the best. Is that so? What happens in INFJ, ENFP? They both give something to each other that they desperately need. Okay, what the INFJ gives is an anchoring to the ENFP. Otherwise, the NFP is going in 10 different directions. The INFJ, holds them in place, and in a good way, not in a restraining way, but it ties you to the ground. INFJs tie us to the ground in a way that we need. We need that. ENFPs, like for example, me, I always know what's going on in the world with people. I'm never confused about people ever. Whether it's on the forum or on YouTube or in my life, I'm never confused, like, what's going on with this person? Never. I've never been confused about a person in my life. I don't know what to do about it. That's my problem. I don't have any judgment as to what to do. I know what the situation is, but what do I do about it? Could not tell you. That's where I get lost. That's where I need an INFJ in my life. So that's what INFJs do. INFJs bring us, give us some stability. And what does the ENFP give to the INFJ? Well, we all know that. The ENFP brightens their day. You know what I mean? In that brooding INFJ, deep Camus-like place, the sunshine comes in and it's an ENFP and there's rainbows and cake, and things to make you happy. That's what we give. We give happiness. I once posted on the forum, what's the relationship of INFJ, ENFP, and I put up a picture of a girl flying a kite. She was running and she had this kite behind her, and that's what it's like. The girl is the INFJ and the ENFP is the kite. The kite needs the INFJ to hold them still, and the INFJ gets to have fun because they have a kite. And I have a kite. And it's like that. And it's balanced, but it can be boring. I don't mean bad boring, but it's not always exciting. I find that my INFP ENFP relationships are more exciting, but that's why they fly apart. Too much energy behind them. The INFJ ENFP relationships are a little calmer, but steadier. They feel steady. Whether we're talking about friendships or otherwise. So that's why I think you want sort of, that sort of dynamic. If you're an ENFJ, you want an INFP. If you're an INFJ, you want an ENFP, because I think it creates an NF balance. So you share the NF values, but at the same time, a balance takes place where there could be sharing of energy that goes around in a circuit. It's much more circuit-like. And I think that allows for growth and change and acceptance and love and all those good things within that. Okay, so that's my answer. All right, so that's enough about relationships, right? Whew, I don't know if you're sick of it. I'm not. I could talk about this all the time.